Welcome to the podcast, where street smart, business smart, all kinds of smart people share their insights into the world of marketing, career journeys, and personal growth. So sit back and prepare to get enlightened with your host, Adam Posner.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast, where I bring you the best and brightest from the world of business, marketing, and personal growth to help you harness your inner tenacity and drive your career forward. Super pumped to introduce my guest today, Jason Wang. And I first met Jason about a year ago through my work with Defy Ventures. And for those of you that do not know, Defy is an in-prison program where incarcerated men and women take part in a university-accredited program on well-being, entrepreneurship training, personal development, mentoring, and business incubation and network development. And we'll get more into that part of the story in a little bit, but more on Jason here. He is a natural born entrepreneur. And at the age of 8, he would buy a box of 300 fortune cookies from his dad's restaurant for $7 and sell them at school for 25 cents each. And he quickly became the fortune cookie king to his classmates. And at the age of 13, he started another business that generated over $100,000 in revenue with 95% profit margins. Unfortunately, this business was illegal. Oh, and his teammates were fellow gang members. Yeah, seriously, real story there. Jason was finally caught at the age of 15 for a first-degree felony and was sent to prison on a 12-year sentence. And since his release, he has earned a double master's, an MBA, and an MS in international business. And I love that. That's freaking awesome. And worked as a management consultant and started several other ventures. Today, Jason is the founder and CEO of Free World, and he's here today to share his incredible story of perseverance and personal growth. Jason, welcome to the podcast, man.
Hey, Adam, thank you so much for having me. This is a whole lot of fun. Thanks.
This is awesome. I'm so thrilled to have you here today. So why don't we jump right in? Just to give everyone a little bit of background here, let's talk about your family a little bit, because a lot of people who are incarcerated, and I know this firsthand from my work with Defy when we do the Step to the Line program, there's a real difference in family support for those who've been incarcerated or not. Talk to us a little bit about your family structure, like how supportive they were.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the big secret for a lot of people that are starting to learn more about the criminal justice system is that in many cases, not all, but in many cases, when you look at the childhood experiences for the guys that are in prison, you start to empathize on why they made the decisions that they made. And so my childhood experience is an example of that. So my parents, they were immigrants from China and Malaysia, and they came to America really looking for the American dream. They wanted the 2-story house, white picket fence, economic opportunity that they wouldn't otherwise have in Asia. And so when they came to the United States, they were extremely poor. They barely knew the language, and they didn't really know anybody. And so they had to work from the ground up. My father was a gang member, and he met my mom, and we grew up in poverty, and my dad making a ton of really bad decisions. My dad had a really bad temper that he would normally take out on me. And this would come out in a couple of different ways. In the more extreme cases, he would get so mad that he would take out a butcher knife and he would chase me around the kitchen trying to kill me. Another time, he was chasing me down with his car trying to run me over. What was pretty commonplace is, when he would get really, really angry, he would put down uncooked grains of rice on the tile floor, and he would make me kneel in it.
Oh, man.
And those uncooked grains of rice would get so embedded in my knees that I would literally have to pry them out. Another time, he got so mad that he stripped me down butt naked and threw me out into a blizzard in Iowa, and would just constantly beat on me. So that was a childhood that I grew up in. Really didn't have a whole lot of safety and security. Grew up in Iowa as one of the only minorities out there.
Right.
And so got picked on a lot as a kid. People would always call me Bruce Lee, Jet Li, and all this other stuff, which kind of worked to my favor in some sense. But I didn't really have anybody to turn to. And so by the age of 10, I had already attempted suicide 3 times. And it was just real tough. At the age of 11, my parents got divorced. Turns out that my dad had a wife and 3 kids from China that he brought over to America. Age of 13, I joined a gang, and to me, the gang really represented the family that I wish I had at home.
That's an interesting dynamic there. It's something that you're yearning for, that connection,
Yeah,
the feeling of belonging.
yeah, that feeling of belonging, of people that respect and care for you. And the gang leader really, to me, was more of a father figure, and he taught me things to be better at what we were doing, which was committing crimes. And they were terrible decisions, but at that time, that was the family that I gravitated to.
That's crazy. Now, was that gang in Iowa, or was that when you moved?
No, that was when I moved to Texas.
Wow, that's crazy. And how did you get? How did they recruit you?
Yeah, I mean, really, it started out just by partying. I mean, I was 13 years old. I would steal my mom's car all the time. I had a hardship license from Iowa, so you can get a license when you're 14 years old. And so
Wow,
by the time I hit 14, I was driving around.
that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we got the license is because my grandma, she was 80 years old, and she had a broken hip and diabetes, and my mom was working 12-hour night shifts. And so my mom would come home totally exhausted from work, and my grandma would sometimes need medical attention. And so the only other person in the household was me. And so as a young kid, I would drive my grandma to and from the doctor's appointments. But in my spare time, I would go out and skip school, party. And that's when I started to meet this group of young kids.
So, obviously gangs are not a good thing, but let's talk about what you did learn from the gang that you applied to your future, where you really found those true entrepreneurship skills that you applied later in life.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, don't realize that gangs really operate just like businesses do. So if you look at some of the most well-run gang organizations, they have a board of directors. They have bylaws, they have sales strategies, logistics, wholesaling, marketing, branding.
Except that it's all legal, what you're selling.
It's all legal, right? And so they run businesses with higher risk than maybe some of the other legal businesses out there, and sometimes with much higher profit margins. So that is a business, and it's just directed in a legal way. The lessons that I learned when I was with the gang was planning, was strategy, was logistics, really doing your homework on your future victims. And as I'm going through this, like it's terrible to talk about it in this way. I have lived over the past 15 years looking back at the things that I did with this blanket of guilt, because I was just a terrible person back then, making really selfish decisions, but doing it because I felt like it was a way for me to survive.
I hear you. You
Right?
did what you had. Yeah, in that moment, you did what you had to do to survive. It was a survival tactic.
And don't get me wrong, like no crime is okay. No crime is okay.
There's always a victim in the end, one way or another.
Right, but when you're struggling to put food on the table, it really drives people to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Yeah, that's a tough one. So let's talk about prison for a little bit, if you don't mind. And I think it's really insightful for people to understand this. So you were convicted and went to prison at the age of 15. Were you in juvenile, or were you with the adults at 15?
No, I went to the juvenile.
And then did they move you to the adult prison at 18?
No. So but basically the background of the prison system is that in Texas, if you're under the age of 16 and a half, then you can be charged as a juvenile. And as a juvenile, you can go to prison. The prison will hold kids between the ages of 10 and 20 years old. So imagine like an 18-year-old in a cell with an 11-year-old.
I don't even want to go there, man.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. But, you go into these facilities, but as a juvenile, when they give you a sentence, you have the ability to do a minimum of 3 years and a maximum of the term that they give you. So an example of that is that I went in on a 12-year sentence, but my minimum was 3 years. And the idea is that you're a kid,
give you a second chance.
Yeah, the youth prison system has a real big focus on rehabilitation. So they want to give you that second chance. But the environment that I was walking into, I would say is in some cases worse than some adult prisons. In adult prisons, it is more organized and systematized. So what that means is that in the adult prison, it's normally segregated by race. And so you might have BGF, which is Black Guerrilla Family. You might have AB, the Aryan Brotherhood. You might have the Norteños, the Sureños. So that's Northside Mexican as well as Southside Hispanics. And that's normally the gang organizations that you go into and you stick to your own race. Well, in the juvenile prison population, it's a little bit different, where it's not as much race segregated, but more on street gangs, at least in my experience.
Right.
And in the adult systems, they have a hierarchy. They have shot callers at every single prison that really organize and keep their soldiers within their battle lines, right? So you can't just go off and start stabbing people or selling drugs to the wrong race or whatever it is. And if you do, the gang will actually punish their own gang members.
So they'll self-police themselves. What the irony, right?
Yeah, exactly. In the juvenile system, imagine a bunch of 16-year-olds that are angry at the world.
It's Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, and they feel like they have something to prove. So it was incredibly violent there. We had, kids stabbing each other, kids stabbing the correctional officers. But what didn't help is that there was a whole lot of corruption in the Texas Youth Commission, which is the prison agency that I was incarcerated at, that wasn't being reported. And in 2007, all that stuff finally came to light. And what they found out was that correctional officers were taking 13 and 14-year-old kids, putting them into isolation cells and sexually assaulting them. And matter of fact, they even found one report of a warden who is basically the boss of the prison. Most of the time, they have a house that's right outside the prison grounds. And he would take a kid over to his house, sexually exploit this kid, and then put him back into the facility. And he's the boss, right? So, what grievances are you going to file? Who's going to hear about that issue? So that sexual abuse was rampant throughout the facility. But not only that, they also had an 80% recidivism rate. So
they weren't doing their job. They weren't doing their job to rehab.
Exactly. So 4 out of 5 kids that went into the prison system would return in 3 years. That is ridiculous. Yeah. At a cost of $120,000.
And was that a private system?
No, it's a state-run system.
Okay. Someone's still making money off it.
Yeah, people are still making money off it. I mean, the good thing about prisons is that a lot of times they're in rural areas. And so the prison becomes the jobs.
Yeah, it's the economy of the town.
It's the economy of the town, right? And if you're low educated, you can get a job as a prison correctional officer, which pays well, has good benefits, and it's a safe job. But it also costs taxpayers $120,000 to incarcerate one kid for 1 year.
That's insane.
1,000, and 4 out of 5 are coming back within 3 years. So
that's crazy. So how old are you when you got out?
So I was 18 when I got out.
So let's talk about that. You get out, you're 18. What happened next? So you're fresh on the street. Was your family waiting for you?
Yeah, I had a really supportive mother. I hated my mom all the way up until I went to prison. And a part of that is because I placed a whole lot of blame on her for not protecting me when my father was beating the crap out of me. And it wasn't until years later that I started to realize that she was scared of my dad too. But as a kid, you don't think about that, right? You're thinking, oh, it's your parents. Like, why isn't my mom protecting me?
Why aren't you protecting me?
But when I was arrested right in front of her in the garage of her home. Cops pulled up, guns drawn. Mom came out of her bedroom, and she saw me getting arrested. And even in my lowest point, she fought for my innocence. She said, "You've got to have the wrong kid because my son would never hurt you."
She didn't believe that you would have done that.
Yeah. And immediately after, I go to the jail, and she pulls out her life savings, $10,000, to pay for her attorney. And when I go to prison, she visits me every single weekend. Even though she was working a 12-hour night shift, she would drive 14 hours just to come see me in prison for 2 hours.
Wow.
And she used to always say that even though you are physically in prison, mentally and emotionally, I'm in prison with you.
It's heavy.
And, every time she would come to visitation, her and my grandma would be crying. And I started to realize that I'm the cause of her pain. And, it's because of my actions, my selfish actions, that I'm causing all of this hurt to my family, but also to the community, the victims. So that really was a changing or turning point in my life. The other thing that she did was, when I was in prison, she used to send these huge packets of mail. And in the very beginning, I used to think that was like from my homeboys or some of the girlfriends that I had when I was out. My mom was sending me math homework.
She wanted to keep you sharp, man.
She wanted to keep me sharp. She would send me books on stocks, geography, religion. She thought that because she couldn't physically protect me, she thought that by occupying my time, by sending me books and things to read, that I would be safe. And she was right. I spent the entire time reading books because my mom kept sending them over. So when I got out, my mom, she was sitting at the gate waiting for me. And she was extremely supportive.
So you're 18 when you get out. Did you get your GED when you were inside?
Yeah, so I had the chance to get my GED. I got my high school diploma. I also started up a Bible study class, as well as a GED program to help the other guys get their GEDs. I would teach them math and reading. Because of all the corruption at the facility, I had a chance to testify in front of the state senate on pro-social activities or new ways of rehabilitation that would help us. So I really advocated for college classes and vocational trades. Unfortunately, none of that stuff went through. But the good thing was, when I was released, they gave me a full ride scholarship to any college in Texas.
That's fantastic. It's crazy. It's crazy how life works. So now you're in school. Was it an away school or were you close to home?
Yeah, so I was close to home. I had my pick of whatever school I wanted to go to. I was thinking about UT Austin, but I had been away from home for 3.5 years, and
you want to be close to your mom.
And so I wanted to be close with my mom.
That's interesting.
We had missed out on all those years together.
Now, did the other students know about your past history, or did you kind of go under the radar?
Yeah, no, I mean, other students wouldn't know, but employers did. And
you're trying to get jobs.
Yeah, it was hard to get a job. I mean, first of all, I'm a young kid coming out of school. My GED reads getting state school, which is a prison. So I don't have the best resume, and I got no formalized education while I was inside the prison. Basically my high school diploma and GED were all self-taught. So it was just tough getting a job because every single time I would go up, they would see my felony, and they would say, "Hell no."
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So you complete school, you get your master's, and then what? What's next? You're trying to get a job in the real world. You're facing some struggles there. People are turning you down based on your incarceration history. What'd you do?
Yeah, so to kind of rewind the clock a little bit. So I get released at the age of 18, and I was able to finally find a job as a server. But because I couldn't get any real job, I ended up creating my own. And so I created my first business, Wang Innovation, 6 months out of prison. That was through a program called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program, which is kind of the predecessor of Defy Ventures.
Yep.
And they are also a Shark Tank for ex-felons to start a legalized business. So yeah, I got a really great mentor, Bob Frankenfeld. He's still my friend to this day. Really big real estate investor in Dallas, and he was the one who really got my entrepreneurial juices flowing by making a couple of introductions and kind of guiding me along the way. So I start my first business. I'm working 2 or 3 jobs. I'm taking 21 credit hours every single semester. I graduate within 4.5 years of release with a double master's, an MBA with a concentration in finance and accounting, and a Master of Science in International Business. And then it's on to the next step. So I'm looking for a job. I applied to Ericsson as a business analyst 5 times before they actually said yes. And it was a lot of convincing, but they gave me an opportunity, was promoted to a project manager, left that to start management consulting, left that to start my next venture, and then my next venture, and then my next venture. And, now I'm self-employed and nobody's checking my background.
Yeah, I love it, man. So let's talk about Free World for a little bit. Why don't you fill everybody in on what the impetus was to create Free World and what are you building with this company?
Yeah, I mean, so in my opinion, the best form of rehabilitation is a living wage job, bar none. The guys that have applied to my program, 50% of them are unemployed. And if they are employed, they're working temporary positions making $14 an hour.
That's not sustainable life wage.
well, especially out here in California, you can't raise a family. You can't take care of yourself on $14 an hour.
Yeah, I
Especially
mean that's barely $28,000 a year pre-tax
exactly.
in a 40-hour week.
And when you look at the reentry experience, depending on your crime, you can actually be barred from getting welfare, food stamps, Pell Grants to go to college. Like the deck is stacked against you when you get out. So I started to think, okay, well, what's the best way to end mass incarceration? And in my mind, if I could take 26 million ex-felons all across the United States and help them get jobs paying over 100 grand within 3 years of graduation from my program, that would probably be a good thing.
Yeah, I think so.
And the other thing is that it would start to shift the conversation about what people with criminal histories can do. It would be a tax savings because in California, it costs $75,000 to incarcerate one person for 1 year. And so far, everybody who's gone through my program has stayed out of jail and prison. They haven't gone back.
That's
not
amazing.
only that, but you've got economic output. These guys are making on average about $60,000 their first year.
Yeah, they're contributing to the tax stream. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now it's added tax. They're able to take care of their kids. So now you have a father in the household, right?
I mean, the trickle down is the words speak for itself, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So this is my way of ending institutionalized poverty for this group of people. Because we also teach them how to invest, how to save, how to budget, how to raise credit.
It's those life skills that they maybe didn't learn. Some of the stuff that Defy does also. You're really teaching them how to be, contributing members of society, how to do the stuff that you don't really, that some of us take for granted. Balancing a checkbook, paying your bills, learning how to be a productive member of society. That's incredible. So what's the core business model that you have right now?
Yeah, so the core business model is an income share agreement, or otherwise known as the ISA. A lot of your audience is business people, so they might be familiar with a company called Lambda School. Lambda School is probably the most successful ISA-based company in the US, to my knowledge. What they do is they train people to code for no upfront fee, and then once they graduate, they basically are under contract to contribute a future percentage of their earnings for a set number of years. So it's the same thing for us. What we've done is, first of all, we're the only company in the US that's using ISAs or income share agreements to fund the education for specifically ex-felons. And how the program works is that we will fund their education. We will give them $1,500 while they're in school, so that way they can go to school full time. We pay for all of their tuition. We pay for all the fees. We line them up with jobs before they even graduate.
Yep.
And once they graduate, they get a 3-month grace period, or 90 days, where 100% of their paycheck is 100% theirs. But after that, they contribute a portion of their paycheck to help fund the next person go through school. So
it's all paying it forward.
Yeah, it's all paying it forward. And so guys that go through our program, they understand what the struggle is like for them whenever they first went to prison. Now they have a real opportunity to not only do well for themselves, but also to help the next guy. And I think
this is life-changing stuff, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that must make you feel good, man, that you're paying it forward and giving back. Plus the work that you do, with Defy and other organizations, absolutely incredible. Kudos to that. So let's switch it up a little bit. Let's talk about, life and some of those things that you really, stand for. And I'll throw a little curveball here. What was the greatest piece of advice that you received while you were incarcerated that you apply to now every single day?
The greatest advice that I got, or the biggest learning lesson, is that I'm accountable for my past, present, and future. The decisions that I make today are going to dictate what I'm going to do tomorrow. And until I take full accountability for that, I'm never going to create the future that I want for myself. There are a couple of lessons, so I'll just run through like maybe 2 more. The other one is forgiveness. You don't have to physically be in prison to be in prison. A lot of us put ourselves in mental and emotional prisons. Like, if you don't get that promotion, if your son doesn't get a gold star, whatever it is, right? You start to think that, oh, maybe I'm a bad parent, or maybe I'm stuck in this job forever, or whatever it may be. And so we put ourselves in these prisons that we create for ourselves. So forgiveness is next. And then the third is you have self-worth. The guys that I work with have been beaten up their entire lives. They've been told that they would never amount to anything, that they're always going to fail. The prison system has told them, welcome back soon when they get released. The employers have said, we will not hire you because of your criminal background. And so it is very normal to come out and be extraordinarily depressed because there is no path for a future that you can see, because everywhere you turn, you're getting told no. So one of the greatest learning lessons I had was you have self-worth. Despite what everybody else is fucking telling you, you have self-worth. And that's what I tell my guys on a daily basis.
I love it, man. You're doing great work. Jason, what is legacy? Like what legacy do you want to leave behind? What legacy are you building?
Yeah, I think that, after I committed my crime and did my time, I felt like I had this debt to society that I can never repay. So a lot of the reason why I do this work is to repay the terrible things I did in my past. But the second thing is, what does a legitimate first chance look like for nearly 10% of the population that have become an underclass of American society? These are good people that have made terrible decisions. But I think that, through your experience through Defy, and others, that we've all probably done something that we could have been arrested for.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe because of the color of our skin or economic status or the zip code that we live in, maybe we didn't get caught. But these guys have done their time and paid for their crime. But when they get released, they're essentially given a life sentence because of that felony on the record.
Yeah, they're branded.
So what does a legitimate first chance actually look like for 26 million Americans? What would it mean to actually create a living wage income where you can take care of your family, put your kids through college, move to safer zip codes, break this generational cycle of poverty, especially in Black and brown communities, which make up the vast majority of the prison system?
Yeah, that's heavy, man. I mean, you're definitely helping pave the way, man, and certainly, kudos to you on that. Jason, to this date, what would you say your greatest accomplishment is?
Being a good son.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, your mom, she's been through thick and thin with you, man. God bless her. And Jason, what is something that you do? I'm not gonna say better than others, but what is your superpower, man? What is something that you do so well that you wear that cape that makes you a superhero?
I think empathy, man. Doing this job, it is an emotional struggle on a daily basis because of the situations that my guys begin with and then where they end with. So on the front end, these guys are coming to me with absolutely nothing. Their brothers and sisters are stealing from them. Their mom, just got into a car crash, and so she's in the ICU. Their best friend just got shot in a drive-by shooting. I empathize with that, and I coach them through that entire process, and it's heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
The other day, one of my students sent me pictures of their baby who had internal bleeding in his brain, and said, "Hey, I can't go to school because I've got to take care of this." And it's dealing with that on a daily basis. That's tough. On the flip side, when I see these guys, they're making 100 grand. And there's this guy who sent me a text message who said, "Jason, I don't know how I can ever repay you. I used to be homeless, sleeping at the bus station, so that way I would make it to school every day. And now I'm working at a Fortune 500 company making 80 grand a year. And I feel like I have a future." Stuff like that gives me hope for the future.
Jeez, love it, man. And last but not least, when you were behind bars and the future looked bleak, and you were at your lowest, man. And on the flip side of it, to where we're sitting here today, you're engaged, you're happy, you're building for the future. What is that North Star? What do you look to as a sign of gratitude and to pull you up when things are not going that well?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to say my mom. My mom was my rock the entire time. She was the person that said, remember who you are. When I was in prison, and my lowest points when we had shutdowns and riots and everything else, I lost everything. She goes, remember who you are. You're my son. You know, you're a good person with a great future. And it was her belief in me that gave me the strength to keep going when I didn't feel like I had the strength anymore.
Thank you, man. Thank you for being open and vulnerable. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really do. And in closing thoughts here, you know, the universe has an amazing way of bringing people together. And I'm a firm believer that everyone in my life now and who I will meet in the future is supposed to be there for a reason, whether to help me directly or empower me to be a connection conduit. And Jason and I were brought together to help each other, help others in our own respective fields for our common work with Defy and prison reform. And Jason's story is incredible, and it truly is an example of not letting a big one, mistake define your future, and the true definition of second chances. And no matter how dire a situation is, there is a way out and a positive future, and it's up to you. Ultimately, it's up to you to be positive and make that difference. And I thank Jason immensely for his dedication to a most important social cause. And I thank him for being open and vulnerable, and his motivation, support, and most importantly, his time. Thank you, brother. I certainly appreciate it. And Jason, thank you for joining me. Where could folks connect with you? Where could they learn more about what you're building and how you're helping others?
Yeah, I mean, visit us on www.joinfreeworld.com. It's got our social media links on there. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. But more importantly, I would really encourage others to explore what second chances really mean by volunteering to organizations like Defy Ventures, Prison Entrepreneurship Program, Cornbread Hustle. A lot of these programs are really making a difference in other people's lives, and seeing how you can contribute and help. Because ultimately, this is an issue that affects all of us, whether or not we know it.
Yep.
You know, 95% of these guys that are in prison will get released at some point. So what kind of neighbor do you want? We spend 5 times more on incarceration than we do on public education. You know, do you want to stop it? Do you want your taxpayers going to worthy causes rather than just warehousing human beings for a large portion of their life? And how can you get involved and help?
Absolutely. And also be open to stepping out of your comfort zone. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time. You know, for me, one of my biggest fears ever in life was being in prison behind bars. And I've done some things early on in my life that I'm not proud of. And that would, you know, for me, going back at this age and stepping foot in that men's prison, that was a big step. And it was scary, but I did it, and it opened up my mind and my eyes, and it only encouraged me more to help out on this cause and work with folks like yourself. Jason, thank you so much for your time.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks, Adam.
I appreciate it. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on the podcast. Please be sure to follow us on all the social media channels, link below, and I'll link you directly to Jason as well. Remember, take your online offline. Thank you for joining us, and catch us next week for another episode of the podcast.
Wisdom is forever, but for us, it's time to go. Thank you for joining us. Luckily, we'll be back with our next episode jam-packed with more incredible humans. For more info, please visit www.nhptalentgroup.com.